If I told you that a game had sold well over 3 million copies in its first month after release, would you call that a failure? Most people would assume that to be a huge success, but when Tomb Raider 2013 sold 3.4 million copies in its first month, Square Enix publicly declared that the game had failed to meet expectations. Fast forward to 2025, Ghost of Yotei hit 3.3 million copies in its first month. Almost the exact same amount as Tomb Raider did. Yet, there's a loud crowd declaring at the top of their lungs that the game is a total flop. So, are they right? If these two games are flops, then what does a flop even mean anymore? I think that we can come to a conclusion if we ignore Twitter and view things from simple ROI or return on investment perspective. I'm going to introduce you to the 3 pillars that determine if a game is a flop and to what extent. Using these, we can cut through social media outreach and corporate speak to find a satisfactory answer for ourselves. As a general rule of thumb, if a game fails 2 of the pillars, then it crumbles into a flop. The first pillar is quite simple. Did the game make its money back? For any serious commercial game, the absolute floor of expectations should be a return of investment of at least 1, meaning it made its money back. So this is a matter of not just sales, but of budget. A game could sell 10 million copies, but if they didn't make the money back, it's all worthless. And achieving an ROI of at least 1 doesn't have to be immediate. A lot of people have called out games for being flops after not making back the money in the first month, but then they made it back in the second month. That doesn't necessarily indicate a flop, but an ROI of at least 1 has to be within reach quite early, otherwise it's likely a huge failure. No company would ever choose to invest millions of dollars and many years into a project which they thought would not make a profit. It's clear and simple that for any commercial game, an ROI of 1 is a must. Anything below is a flop. It's also worth keeping in mind that even though I say an ROI of 1 is necessary for it not to be a flop, the issue is that ideally for any gaming company, not only do you want profits, you want the first game to pay for the next game, and hopefully a lot more. But if a game has a budget of 100 million and they make 150 million, I'm not sure I would call it a flop, even though it's not enough to fund the next $100 million game. The second pillar is what was the expectation from the publisher of the game? We can look at it like this. The NVP, or the net present value, is a measurement that takes into account your investment, your expected return, and the time horizon in which you expect to get a return. $1 today is worth more than $1 in 5 years. So the expectations set by the publisher might sometimes seem insane. But if you take into account millions of dollars invested and a 5, 6, 7 year horizon for some games, it makes a lot of sense. The higher amount invested and the more time invested, we have to expect a higher return. And that is exactly what publishers do. Publishers, especially public ones, have to estimate future returns to justify the investment in time and money. But also, companies are run by humans. They can make mistakes, or they can be delusional about the potential of their project. And to clarify, if a hobbyist indie game developer releases their first project where they expect no return, then maybe selling even 1 copy is above expectations. And in that case, it's harder to call it a flop. And thus, these pillars really only work for serious commercial products. And the final pillar doesn't apply to all games, but I find it an important metric nonetheless. How does it compare to franchise history? Is the game part of a franchise? Did it sell better or worse than its predecessor? Was the investment larger or smaller than previous games? Let's say you invest in infrastructure for a game, and then you release it to decent critical success and decent sales, and then you release the second game and it sells worse. That's not a good indicator. But if it costs less, since you have spent all the money on the infrastructure for the first game, is it a flop then? Not really. So with these 3 pillars in mind, what is a flop? Well, One recent example could be the Saints Row reboot. They spent over 100 million USD. They sold less than 2 million copies before the studio was closed down. They didn't make their money back, and they heavily underperformed in comparison to previous entries in the series. Now the game, Concord, spent well over 200 million US dollars, sold only 25,000 units, and there is no franchise history to compare it to. But going back to Tomb Raider, was it a flop? It's hard to say exactly, but it doesn't seem like it, does it? Was it just Square Enix being delusional with their expectations? Maybe. It might have failed second pillar, but it did more than make its money back, and it sold the best out of any Tomb Raider game ever. In my understanding, Ghost of Yotei has made back its money. We're not entirely sure of the expectations, but so far it has outsold Ghost of Tsushima, its predecessor. So the next time you see Square Enix say something didn't meet their expectations, or you see an outrage on Twitter about the game being a flop, keep these pillars in mind. Look up the numbers, they're all there. Viewing things through an ROI perspective makes things way easier and less emotional. If you got any thoughts, let me know in the comments. If not, I'll see you next time.